This is Bonjour Chai, the Just Be a Mensch edition. I'm Avi Feingold in Toronto, here in person with Phoebe Maltzvovi. We are your Frozen Chosen. On today's show, we talk rules, manners, Menschlichkeit. We take a deep dive into these new lists for how to live in current society and whether they have relevance to the Jewish community. So, Phoebe, welcome. We are here together. It's great to be here.
We are. It's amazing.
I'm in Toronto for some CJN all-day meetings we're going to have together and stuff. We're at the wonderful Drake Hotel. We decided to record together.
Yes, it's amazing. And an actual physical table.
So before we get to the show today and all the stuff that we have going, first things first, we are going to have a Great Canadian Seder. Last year, it was a great success. We had a lot of fun with it. I don't know if you remember, Phoebe, or if you heard it.
No, I don't remember this, but I'm curious about it.
So we had a good number of Canadian personalities, some media personalities, some politicians, some rabbis. Each gave us their reflections on the Seder, and we compiled them all together into a wonderful Seder episode with like all of these reflections all at once. It felt great. It was very well received. People loved it, and we're going to do it again. We have a whole new slate of people that we are going to have on the Seder. But you know, if there is a Frozen Chosen among you that are wanting to come on the Great Canadian Seder and speak their piece, the more detailed, the more focused you have as a piece, send us a proposal, send us what you want to talk about, and we'll let you know. Hopefully we can get a few of you in on the Great Canadian Seder. So send it to us at bonjour@thecjn.ca. So if you say, I want to talk about the karpas, or I want to talk about the child who does not know how to ask, or whatever it might be at the Seder, we're going to compile those together as we did last year, and hopefully with some of your input. bonjour@thecjn.ca. Send us your Great Canadian Seder bits about that. The other thing to know is that we have been receiving a lot of responses about our episode on the Chabadification of Judaism. We are planning a part 2, so stay tuned for that. We will compile some of those responses, and we will have other people on to talk about the Chabadification of Judaism again shortly. So let's get into our main topic right after we hear from our sponsor.
Are you in the market for a new watch or a special piece of jewelry? Are you looking for the perfect engagement ring to pop the question? Atelier Lou has all this and more. Eric and the team at Atelier Lou can craft a piece for you, or you can select from some of the exclusive designers that they offer. From a simple bangle to a statement necklace, Atelier Lou can make you or your loved ones sparkle. Located in the heart of Westmount in Montreal or online at atelierlou.com, visit Atelier Lou for your next watch or jewelry purchase. And when you do, make sure to use promo code BON18 for 10% off your next purchase. That's atelierlou.com.
Tell me, Phoebe, what's on your mind these days?
So I've been thinking about etiquette. I have been thinking about etiquette because everybody has been thinking about etiquette ever since New York Magazine published its article, Do You Know How to Behave? Are You Sure? It's not really an article, it's actually sort of a whole
cover package.
Right, a package, right, that's what it would be called. How to text, tip, ghost, host, and generally exist in polite society today. So I wrote about this in the CJN website, but also I've just been thinking about it in terms of, like, is there a Jewish angle? Is there some sort of Jewish angle we can cover? But then Hey Alma beat us to this with a guide by Evelyn Frick called The New, and then in parentheses, Jewish, not triple parentheses, let me be clear, just normal parentheses, The New Jewish Rules. If you have a weird bagel order, own it. And yeah, so there's a lot of discussion of etiquette these days. And I should say the reason this fascinates me is because these guides, both the Jewish one and the New York Magazine one, are interesting in sort of like in how they get really they form this really precise snapshot of a moment in time and the values of a particular milieu in a specific instant. And that's always fun to pick apart.
It really is. I feel like the time was really ripe for this, even though we're at a time where almost rules don't matter, where it's like we are about breaking norms, we are about saying if you want to do this, go ahead. We're not going to tell you what to do or not to do. We are in an unprecedented moment of autonomy in society, and yet there are so many rules and norms that are expected also on the other side. So it's almost like we are being told by the culture in general, right, and by Judaism at the same time also, right, that both do everything in a very prescribed sort of way, right, but also don't tell anybody what to do because that's their choice and that's how they want to do it.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it really gets into this whole idea of so-called wokeness or political correctness as a secular religion, and this idea of there being sort of parameters on behavior and what is and isn't okay that aren't written down as religious rules anywhere, and that are perhaps going to be sort of mysterious to some, and just kind of that there isn't really an agreed upon rule book for everybody. And that's what's always so interesting with an etiquette guide is, whose rules are these? Whose rules are you looking at? And with the New York Magazine one, I think they're pretty upfront about the fact that even though this is presented as a general guide, it's certainly not a specifically Jewish one, it's a general guide, it's not general as in universal. So some of it is very New York specific about like how to tip in New York or whatever, but also the very first item is you don't have to read everyone's book.
Everybody's been talking about this. This is like everybody knows author friends.
Yeah, and I mean, this is something that, okay, like this is not totally irrelevant to my own life, but it is not a general issue that people outside of kind of publishing, journalism, writing, arts, whatever, are dealing with. But then it gets even more glamorous later on, where some of the items are about what to do if you meet like an A-list movie star and how to react and what the etiquette is there. And clearly this is not a guide for absolutely everybody in the world. I just thought that was interesting because it really it tells you that you're looking at the value system of a very specific set of people. And I feel like this comes up further on in the list, and I'm still talking about the New York Magazine one, where there's a lot of like sort of hypersensitive concern in certain areas and a lot of kind of hipster callousness in other areas. And so I should say this is a package with many, many authors. This is not one single authored thing. So if it's not consistent, like there are literally, I think it says possibly in one place, don't ask people what they do for work, and in another place, ask people what they do for work. Like there are things that are just objectively inconsistent because of the many authors. But if you get kind of a general vibe from this list, it's that you should be very sensitive, it says, to your most COVID cautious friends. But also, you should allow people to smoke cigarettes inside.
Wait, that was a weird one.
Well, it's all, and also like you should not accommodate people's food allergies or other food requests at a dinner party. You should just serve them whatever, especially if you're a good cook, and that you should have a hissy fit apparently if they don't eat whatever you serve. So it's really all over the place.
That's a very Jewish one. I was actually thinking about like what are the specific like Jewish, non-Jewish crossovers in the New York list. Yeah. And I thought about that one very specifically in terms of like Shabbat dinner and guests, like and inviting guests and asking them about restrictions and stuff. Or serving the whole roast pig to somebody Jewish. Well,
right?
yeah, so that's obvious, but like,
it's obvious to us, perhaps, but not.
I mean, you have a food sensitivity in your family.
Yes, I mean, so one of my children has anaphylactic food allergies, and my etiquette rule, if I were etiquette dictator, would be just don't put the thing on the invitation about what are your food allergies if you're not planning to do something about it. If you're not planning to do something about it, somebody can just bring their own food or not eat there and eat later or whatever. But if you ask, you can't then go ahead and serve the thing, the very thing the person can't eat. Yeah, so like, we host a lot. And, I remember reading and feeling good about this thing that I read, although we don't do this at all because people don't expect this. It's not the way that people function. Is it like, oh, in Europe, nobody asks you your food restrictions. You're just expected to like eat around whatever the host makes you. And I'm like, yeah, I'm making a meal. I'm thinking about it. Don't tell me I don't like this or I don't like that, or, I want to be, able to cook my meal to my meal's content. But people have these expectations, so we do ask people all the time. And I feel kind of like, sort of in between on that one. Even more broadly, like stepping back from that, it just seems so interesting that the same guide that's telling you to like be really like sensitive to the COVID cautious and make sure that you like, it's all about the etiquette of like avoiding misgendering somebody, and how to sort of deal with it if you accidentally miss it. It seems like it's hypersensitive in certain areas, but then in other areas, it's like, by all means, smoke cigarettes inside and serve the thing somebody's allergic to.
Yeah.
And it just seemed funny because like I was trying to gauge the tone, basically. So like, it seemed like, so there are kind of two sets of hip people these days. I'm going to just, as the world expert on hip people, clearly, like mother of two living in, a somewhat suburban neighborhood of Toronto. Yeah, definitely. But I think in my memory of it in New York, at least, is that there were kind of the downtown avant-garde kind of truly like no rules, no health consciousness, no sanctimony types, sort of artist types. And I think is it Dimes Square? Am I right? Am I hallucinating that that's where they hang out?
I don't know anything about this.
Okay, so there's some area of New York where the people like this hang out. There's some artist woman, muse, something who's kind of at the center of it. There have been articles about these people, and they were not COVID cautious. They were very much not like that. But then there are also people who work in media and who are very much up on like the latest hypersensitivities and all of that. And they also live in New York, and they're also sort of young and hip in a way. And I feel like this guide is this weird mishmash of these two value
both
systems.
the hyper-conscious and the hyper-unconscious.
So that's the way that's the way I would kind of make sense of this, that a New York Magazine guide is about like what's hip in New York these days. And it's kind of
the assumption
both.
that we should, like New Yorkers' etiquette rules should spread out to the rest of the world.
Well, I don't know if this guide assumes that. I mean, I think it's hard to accuse something that's literally calling itself New York Magazine of
Although
New
you and
York
I know, even though,
provincialism.
I mean, we have connections to New York. You've lived in New York.
Well,
you are a New
I
Yorker.
spent most of my life there, yeah.
But I was going to say, New York Magazine and The New Yorker are both very New York-centric, but
Yeah.
also are aware of their space. And The New York Times, right, are three publications that come out of New York that are very New York-centric, but also are aware that they are being read way beyond New York itself.
Sure. I think that's right. And whether, I mean, I was thinking about like a lot of this sort of New York lifestyle content when it is and isn't applicable, specifically to, not to get really provincial, New York and Toronto, not the only places that exist, but the only places I know very well. And there was an article in the New York Times about, no, this was not in the New York Times. Sorry, this was also in The Cut. Oh my goodness, about the rich mothers who relate to Fleischman is in Trouble, the TV
Yes,
show.
I saw that article.
And
we haven't spoken about Fleischman is in Trouble.
I still have to watch it. And then but I have read the lifestyle content about it. And there was all of this stuff about the mothers in New York and like the whole sort of scene at the elementary schools or whatever. And I was trying to think, does this exist in Toronto or not? And the short answer is yes and no.
Oh, yeah. Fleischman's a great place to transition to the Hey Alma article about, the Jewish ways of approaching this. What did you think about these types of rules? Like, which ones were specifically like head scratchers to you? Which ones made perfect sense? What are the ones that are missing? What are the ones that are clearly very Gen Z centric?
Sure. Well, the one that jumped out at me for our purposes was number 15. Don't assume that all rabbis are men. It's 2023, people.
Yeah, that one seems so elementary and so basic. I was like, is that even a rule anymore? But
it's like that feminist riddle where it turns out that the surgeon is the mother, like the father. Yeah,
exactly.
So it's like, oh my goodness, a woman can be a doctor. Oh boy, that's exciting.
So that one seemed like...
Well, I will say that a lot of the list seemed to be generationally mysterious to me. So, for example, number 39, never order your deli sandwich on white bread. Be an adult, enjoy some seeded rye. It felt like very Catskills sort of...
Yeah, especially given the subhead, if you have a weird bagel order, own it. Right, and saying that you should be able to order whatever you want, and if you want, there was something about if you want ketchup on your latkes, that's acceptable too.
No, it's not. Sorry, but
sure, you and I might say that,
yeah.
But if you can go and say that you're allowed to have a weird bagel order, and you're allowed to have a weird latke topping, but you're not allowed to order something on white bread.
Well, it's riffing on what was interesting. Okay, so so another one that really jumped out at me was never ask someone if their nose is real. Because I cannot imagine, not to be all, it's 2023 people, but it is 2023 people. And when is this happening? Like, where in 1960 Long Island is this all taking place?
Yeah, and on top of that, like, I thought that we're in a place in society where everybody talks about the work that they're doing and they're getting done, and there's no shame around that.
If you've had an extra nose added to the side. And the wonderful thing about us recording in person is that when I say an extra nose added to the side, I can physically gesture for where that other nose
yes,
would be.
of course.
And you can see what I mean. Yeah, so that was one. Then another one that I thought we need to flag for sure is number 23. If you're approached by a Chabadnik on the street asking if you're Jewish and you don't want to engage, an appropriate response is, I'm not interested, but thank you. And then it says, ignoring them is rude. Do you agree, Avi, with that assessment? Because
I mean, I think ignoring everybody is rude. But then again, there are plenty of people that I am sure Evelyn ignores, including maybe us. And
well, when I give Evelyn a big hello,
and she ignores me, like, I don't know, like, I'm sure there are people that Evelyn Frick thinks it's okay to ignore, and or whatever. And, you know, maybe if you want to ignore a Chabadnik because you're just not even interested in engaging with them that day, that's fine too.
Oh, I think so. This is going to be, I'm going to be,
you don't have to be rude.
I'm going to be extremely 2023 post Me Too feminist about this. But I think I ignore people on the street who try to talk to me as a rule. That's just something I grew up, yes, in New York City, in an era of New York City that was maybe a little more like the one now and less like the one of sort of the Bloomberg years or whatever. And like, I was a 12-year-old girl, people were trying to talk to me all the time. I would not talk to them. I have it ingrained, do not talk to people talking to me on the street. Mm-hmm. And I don't talk to people talking to me on the street unless it's like, you know, an 80-year-old woman at the bus stop talking about when the bus is coming, we have a long conversation. That's fine. That I do. But like, if somebody's soliciting on the street for something, I do not talk to them. And that is whether it's Chabad, whether it's
Greenpeace,
whatever it is.
People who are asking for the monthly charities or whatever, Amnesty International.
I just say,
if I think
I'm going to be hassled, I say no thanks. For my own sake to get away, I do not talk to people on the street. So I don't see why. I think there's this weird notion that maybe some secular Jews have, that you're like being anti-Semitic if you don't like acknowledge the Chabad person, that they somehow are this like avatar of Jewish authenticity and you have to kind of duly acknowledge that you are Jewish to them or else you're self-hating or something. I don't think so. I think there's somebody trying to talk to you on the street. If you don't want to talk to them, you keep walking.
Yep. Yeah, I'm okay with that.
So which jumped out at you? Because I have more, but I don't want to...
I can go with like, I mean... There's some that were so wrong from a Jewish perspective. I was like, you know, like if you get a tattoo, don't lie to your Jewish family about it. And for the love of Hashem, if it's in Hebrew and you don't speak Hebrew, spell check first. So yes, the second one for sure. Do I think that we should be getting tattoos? If you're observant and you think about like tattoos as something wrong, then maybe you shouldn't get a tattoo. But I'm not here to, again, tell you what to do. But I don't think that it's wrong necessarily to like not tell your family if it's going to cause like great familial trauma. You know, like if you have a tattoo that's easily covered up and is never going to be seen, and you decided that you wanted this tattoo and you know that it's going to devastate your family, you don't need to like be out and proud about it and say, hey, Mom, by the way, Bubby, I got a tattoo.
Well, is that the Gen Z aspect here? Is this the like, this is a guide for people getting a tattoo to rebel against their parents as versus people getting a tattoo who are, you know, autonomous as adults doing what they feel like with their bodies. You know what I mean? Like, because why, like, I guess, I mean, fine, like, I can't imagine this coming up that I would be getting a tattoo. I feel like I've made it to 39 without one. I'm probably not about to. But if I did, I can't.
I thought we were going for matching ones after this recording.
Well, this would be, I think they only sell cannabis over here these days. So if you want a tattoo, you might have to dig. But yeah, so that was.
No. I'm not getting a tattoo. Mom, if you're listening.
Nor am I. But if I did, I can't imagine being concerned about, well, who would be my family? Would it be like, at this point, it would be my husband. And I feel like, yeah, he probably would know if I had a tattoo. But anyway, but can I just say the one that I liked, though, before we turn to sort of fisking
the Alma piece.
The fisking of the Alma. It sounds like some sort of like festival. Okay, so I really liked one item. Okay. Number 9, a little shout out to Inside Number 9.
Oh, I was about to talk about that, actually, okay. 9 and 10.
Oh, really? So all pets in a Jewish household are Jewish, and it's acceptable to speak about them as such. I thought that was cute and kind of silly. Is there a religious angle I'm missing?
And if you have the opportunity to throw a bar mitzvah, this is number 10.
Okay, no,
mitzvah,
I'm not talking about bar mitzvah.
Or
but
bee mitzvah, for any other kind of pet, do it. And if you need inspo, look here and here. I am so against both of these.
Number 9, really?
Number 9 and 10,
oh,
yeah.
Oh, no, not 9. No.
I think it's because you and I are very different about the way in which we think about our Judaism, right? I think that when you call something that is so obviously not spiritual or not religious, that thing, you're kind of reducing the religious aspect of the people that actually care about it. Like for people that see religion as something deep and meaningful and a connection with, a higher being of some kind or another, and to say, oh yeah, my cat is Jewish too, and my cat's going to have a bar mitzvah, right?
Well, yeah, I think the bar mitzvah, so I'm like a strong
They're
proponent.
one of the same. It's basically saying like...
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Because to me, 9 seems wonderful and 10 seems icky. And I was trying to pinpoint why, and I think it is that I could imagine some pets being sort of culturally as much Jewish as they are Canadian or whatever. Like they live in the family they live in.
So yeah, from a cultural perspective, it makes perfect sense.
But the bar mitzvah seems it just seems sort of cringe.
Right, so that actually goes to a lot of what's on this list is some of these rules clearly think about Judaism as something that is spiritual and faith-based, and some of it is very, very cultural. And I recognize both, but I'm always going to err on the side of faith and tradition and religion, which is fine for me. And I love the fact that Phoebe Maltz-Bovey is very much in camp culture, and that's where that lies. But I see
it is what it is,
confusing, and that's what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, with that in mind, it made sense, right? And this is very cultural, right? The number 19, where it was like the Ashkenormativity rule, right? Getting thrown out the window. If you're an Ashkenazi Jew, don't assume that other Jews are also Ashkenazi, right?
Oh, well, yeah, I don't know. I wrote about that actually for the CJN website this week in terms of Hanchi, and a little bit, it was sort of digging into my many thoughts on this. But I wonder what this means. Like, if you're in certain communities in North America, it would be a fair assumption that another Jew is Ashkenazi. And if they tell you that they're not, is this the crisis? Like, it's the same as, like, Dan Savage, the Sex and Relationships podcaster, columnist, he has mentioned many times that, like, people assume that the parents of, like, young children are straight, and then because most are, and he doesn't think that's like somebody doing a homophobia if they assume that.
I think he's right, but I think that I'm also right on this one, in that in the cultural moment that we live in right now, I think we're still in this moment where Mizrahi, Sephardic, all of the non-Ashkenazi Jews still are sort of semi in the closet. Right, so it's like
really?
Where? Gay
in Canada or in Israel?
Maybe less so. It's starting to change. Definitely in America, Montreal is hugely Sephardic. Like there's a significant Sephardic population. It's very different there.
I do not remember this being the case when I was in high school. Like if I had friends who were Sephardic, they would just like say they were Sephardic.
Yeah, but I'm saying that most people that are Ashkenazi, the same way that in the 80s you just assumed everybody was straight.
Yes.
Right, unless somebody was so obviously gay. Right, and so in the Ashkenazi world, you just assume everybody's Ashkenazi, and so you don't stop to think unless you know for sure.
But what does that mean? I guess I'm wondering what that means practically. Like, if you learn that somebody you thought was Ashkenazi isn't, what happens?
From a cultural perspective or from a religious perspective?
Either.
So from a cultural perspective, I would say that they don't necessarily have the same food frames of reference as you do. They don't have the same, musical Jewish music. If they're into Jewish music, they might not be into the same. They might not have the same things at home that you had. So that's.
Or actually, can we pause on the cultural for a second, because that's actually on this list from Hey Alma. So, because the follow-up part is, and if you're Ashkenazi, certainly don't expect Mizrahim, Sephardim, Bukharian Jews, etc., to educate you on your cultural differences. Now, this is very hard. Like it's not my job to educate you. I feel like if you're talking about like cuisine and cultural references, and by the by, I feel like this is a good time to mention Seinfeld, Jerry Seinfeld. He's not fully Ashkenazi. He's like part Ashkenazi, right? And like part,
I
think he might be part
no
Syrian.
clue.
No, but I mean, like
this.
I think of him as like a real sort of Ashkenazi reference, but he's like, he himself is actually, anyway, we can all Google
The most
that
Ashkenazi
later.
person on that show is George Costanza, let's be honest.
That's why I relate to him so
Even though
closely.
he's not Jewish.
That's why I relate to George Costanza more than to most people. Yeah. But yeah, I think it's not my job to educate you. It's like, why not just share both of your food traditions?
The
What's
assumption...
problem? Why is it like racist to say how, if I tell you how I make matzo ball soup? Like,
Yeah, so I think that that's bleeding in from like culture, identity politics of like, it's not my job to tell you like how I do my hair if I'm a black person, right? Or what's so different about it.
This is such a different context
it's
from
so,
that.
I really, really do
different
agree.
Context.
I can't agree more.
But so the religious one, it seems, would be more, and that you can speak to, because...
Yeah, and from a religious perspective, there are a lot of differences, right? Whether you eat certain foods that are referred to as kitniot on Passover is a big one. The way in which you pray, if you pray regularly, is very, very different if you're Ashkenazi versus Sephardi. So there are significant differences, and you can't assume, right, that, you know, and like there are times when one should be sensitive. So, for example, if you are in a synagogue and you're going to ask somebody to lead services and it's an Ashkenazi synagogue and it turns out that they're Sephardic, you either have to be okay with them possibly praying Sephardic because they don't know how to do it otherwise, or maybe not ask them, or, you know, ask something else, ask someone else. And that's a fair thing to say. It's nothing wrong with the way in which you pray, but we pray this way, and either we're going to be okay with all of us praying differently for this service, or we'll find somebody else.
Yeah, so I'm going to have to take a huge step back.
Please.
Do you think that the craving for these etiquette lists is some kind of secular desire for religion, right? Because here are these rules, you know, commandments of sorts, that people who are not, you know, necessarily religious, even the Hey Alma one is, as you say, sort of cultural in a lot of places. Do you think that the reason people are sort of really excited about these etiquette lists is that there's some kind of like thirst for religion? Or do you think it's just a totally different category?
I've heard this argument being made. I kind of like it. I think that there's definitely, you know, people have examined this idea about thirst for ritual. There's somebody by the name of Caspar Terkuly who wrote a book called The Power of Ritual, where he shows how ritual has permeated secular society. He's somebody who went to Harvard Divinity School. He studied the idea of secular ritual. He looks at yoga. He looks at SoulCycle. He looks at various other places where rituals take place and moments in secular life are highly ritualized. And I think that that's fascinating. I really, it points out that we do need that. But the other side of religion is that there are rules, there are norms, there are things that we do and things that we don't do. And these rules are there to sort of like remind us them. And so we have legal rules like don't cross on a red light, which apparently pedestrians, at least, in Montreal all do it. And apparently here in Toronto, nobody crosses the street on a red light.
Well, I wouldn't say nobody, but that's giving too much away. Yes.
Well, yes, because you're a New Yorker and I'm a Montrealer, so we're the ones crossing the streets on the red light. But like, yeah, I think that there's definitely something there about that, and especially the way in which this Alma list bleeds into things that are ritualized and do have, you know, moments of like religious impact here, right? That anyone can wear kippas and talis, not just cis men, right? Sure, that's
they sell those scarves periodically at H&M that look like talises.
I go for that one. The one place where I will push back is, again, cultural norms, right? If you're in a synagogue where people will look very, very scant at you, if you are a liberal rabbi, if you are a woman who is a rabbi who has religious cousins and you gladly subsume your liberalism to go to this bar mitzvah of this kid and you're in the women's section behind, you know, on one side of the mechitza, and literally nobody would ever conceive of wearing a talis, and you wear a talis all the time, I would say, honestly, maybe you shouldn't, just because that's not a norm in the space that you're in, and it's better to go with that norm. And I might get pushback from liberal rabbis about this, but I do believe that maybe sometimes your job is to either not show up to a space if you can't abide by their norms, or not wear the talis.
That's a tricky one, because I mean, I'm thinking that if you're in that situation and you show up in like a strapless gown,
So you should know not to show
I know,
up
but
in
I
a
mean, but I
strapless
feel like
gown.
these are different to me.
It's like this woman. Did you see this article, this thing about this woman by the protest?
Suit.
The bathing suit at the
I saw
hotel?
some picture from the back of the woman in the
It's
bathing
the
suit.
only picture that seems to have been out right now.
Oh, well, yeah, I did see that picture. Memorable.
Yeah, so she was basically protesting and saying the norms here are
But I
a
think
problem.
that's different. So I guess what I was going to say about that, though, is that if you're showing up and you simply are, like, out of vanity or whatever, feel that you have to show off your body at every possible instance and are going to prioritize that, that's, like, different from, I feel like wearing a tallis to make some kind of statement about your own religion, politics, is like, it's different. It's not necessarily about one being better or worse or more appropriate or whatever, but they're different choices.
They are, but I think
But
that
they might amount to the same.
They're relatively similar, right? So I
Sure.
have a friend who is a conservative rabbi who will not pray in a minyan with a mechitza because he believes in egalitarianism
that's what I was
so
gonna ask
much.
you,
So the
which do you
same way
think
that
is
he says
better?
that Orthodox people will not pray in a space with without a mechitza, he won't pray in a space with one.
Well, that was going to be my next question, is like, is it better to show up inappropriately dressed to the service, or is it better to just, if you don't believe in the ethics of that denomination, to just not show up at all?
So context specific, and I would never make a general rule. I would say if it's about your
then you can't
strapless
do one of these
backless
lists.
gown,
Yeah.
maybe find something that's a little more appropriate.
Sure.
If it's about a tallis, maybe if you feel strongly enough about it, don't go if you can't wear a tallis, but I don't think that you should wear a tallis to provoke, even if you're not doing it for a provocative manner. You're doing it because you genuinely believe in you're wearing a tallis. And the same way, even though you genuinely believe that this is the dress you should be wearing, you probably shouldn't be wearing it in certain spaces.
And do you think that more observant people, what's their social obligation if somebody's having a reform bar mitzvah? Can they attend that?
I think everybody's going to be different.
Because I mean, I think I guess I don't like a system where
So I've spoken in spaces where I don't feel comfortable praying, and I'll like attend, but be there and not necessarily pray, and try to make it clear that like I respect your space, but it's not a space for me, and that it's not a value judgment. And I think that we have to make those things as acceptable as possible. I think if your family member is getting married and it is not being performed by a rabbi that you find acceptable, you should still try and show up and be there for family and not make a fuss. And I think that those are important norms. That's the menschlichkeit of it all, right? That's my favorite word. I think this whole thing, right, gets subsumed under the rules of menschlichkeit, how to be nice and be like a good person. And that's there.
Yeah, that I think that makes sense. So I guess one thing that really struck me about this list, sort of like to kind of the Hey Alma list, to sort of look at it cohesively, is what year it seemed to be from. And I realize that I'm kind of foreshadowing what's going to be my nachas for this week, but I won't drop what that is just yet. But what I find is that like it seems to be this weird mix of like hyper aware of things like, again, with the tallis, anyone can wear kippahs and tallis, is not just cis men. So cisgender men, this is very like trans aware. And the author, as I said, uses she, they pronouns, like very sort of trans aware, very of the moment aware, sensitive list. But it also seems to come from, like, as I said, like 1960 Long Island in some way. Like a lot of the references are extremely like, for the Jews who go to summer camp and know what sort of like, and have the rye bread. And then there was like, so number 64, about 35 years old is the cutoff for calling yourself an NJB, nice Jewish boy, or NJG, nice Jewish girl. Are people like, some of these references just seem to come from like who is this still a thing? Nice Jewish boy, nice Jewish girl. That just all seems extremely.
Or Jap. Number 69.
Jap also, this all seems extremely dated and like just from something from a Philip Roth novel and not from anybody's life. I mean, it just like technically I'm probably like a good 10 years too old for this list, and like it just all seems to be coming from some way earlier era, except when it doesn't. So it's like this thing, it's never acceptable to call someone a shiksa. And I'm thinking like, when in the last like 20 years has somebody seen like a Jewish man and a non-Jewish woman and said, oh no, he's with a shiksa? Like, where is this happening?
I still hear people saying shiksa.
But in a way like that it's...
Very internally, right? Again, it's a word that you're not supposed to use in polite society anymore. You're not supposed to, and what's interesting is that it's very much a gendered thing. The Yiddish equivalent for a male would be a shagitz,
right.
And you don't hear anybody saying, oh, she's with a shagitz.
My husband is called one every other day. No, just kidding. Yeah, this is...
It's on his business card.
Astrophysicist.
Shagitz.
I mean, it will be now, right? Like now that we've said this. Yeah, it's just like all of this just seemed to be out of some other world. And
there's so much questionable, like, I mean, I actually was, like, the thing that struck me was you're never supposed to be Ashkenormative, and yet every single cultural reference that is in the article is completely Ashkenormative.
Well, right? Okay, thank you. Yes, that seemed to be extremely, because it's trying to be kind of like this broad city sort of like...
Well, that's what Hey Alma is, let's be honest, right?
Sure.
Yeah, I don't know. I thought it was very not okay, for example, from a religious perspective, to say it's okay to skip the part of the Seder after dinner, right? I'm a huge... no, you really, if your family is doing that, don't skip it, right? Be part of it, and that's a fundamental part of the Seder.
But it's coming back to me that at a Seder I did go to with some family in Toronto once. There was definitely a kippah on a dog at one point.
Okay, whatever. I'm not going to go there.
But okay.
The other one that I thought was fascinating, sorry, I have to put this one in. This is like blew me away, right? For no pun intended. Number 59, never blow out the Shabbat candles, even if you lit them late and want to go to bed. Either stay up or be prepared for your home to be engulfed in righteous flames. And what's fascinating is the Mishnah actually has a discussion about this. Oh, really? And the Mishnah actually says that if you are fearful, right, for thieves, right, if you're living in a place where there's not a lot of light and there's light in the window because of the Shabbat candles and you're afraid that somebody's going to rob you, or you're afraid of various other evils that might befall you, which in this case is exactly that, you're allowed to blow out the Shabbat candles.
Wouldn't that be, I mean, I'm not even up on the Mishnah, but isn't that a well-known thing, like, that you shouldn't fast on Yom Kippur if you're going to, like, die if you do it? Isn't that the same general idea?
Well, blowing out Shabbat candles versus fasting on Yom Kippur
No, but I mean, but it's the same idea of, like, if you're going to die if you follow the letter of the law, you don't, right?
Yeah, so I would say here's a great Orthodox case, right? That will, and I'll extend it to liberal stuff, right? Say you lit the Shabbat candles, fully expecting you're home, everything's fine, you're gonna be home for the next few hours until the candles are out and everything's good, and then an hour later, right, something happens, unexpected, totally a good thing, whatever it is, everybody has to leave the house, right? And you say to yourself, I'm not really comfortable leaving these candles on because we might have a fire and it's Shabbat and I don't know what to do, but we have to leave this house right now. Then I would say you should blow out the candles. Absolutely. The same sort of approach, because you are fearful. There's a fear for your life and you are going to always be sitting there wondering. And in this case, right, maybe light the candles earlier than whatever, or light smaller candles. But if you really are afraid and you say to yourself, I'm really tired, I'm going to sleep now, but I can't and I'm afraid of whatever, then maybe...
Well, this literally happened. All of this happened with Hanukkah candles last year because we...
Hanukkah candles are different because...
Are they less...
Because on Shabbat, the idea is that on Shabbat you're not supposed to extinguish a flame.
Right.
And therefore, that's a Shabbat violation, so you're stuck.
Well,
right?
We were trying for the cultural and, quasi-religious reasons to have the menorah going, and at one point my children were ages where this was not physically plausible. But this year we managed to do it, and our house did not get engulfed in righteous flames. I have to mention also, while we're fisking this list, what is this? The non-Jews section, because that was interesting and also sort of confusing for me about like where we are in time. Non-Jews get 3 items, okay? And I'm just wondering, like, in what world this is taking place. Okay, so item 25, always correct/speak out against anti-Semitism if you feel safe doing so. 26, teaching someone about the Holocaust or other instances of violent anti-Semitism is never preachy. 27, respond to someone proselytizing to you however you see fit, within reason. Okay. Is that really, even for observant Jews, the extent of your interactions with non-Jews in 2023?
Is whether it's the extent
Is it just like anti-Semitism and proselytizing?
I
mean, again, like, so my husband's not Jewish. Our interactions are
he
like,
doesn't wake you
how
up
do you
every
get...
morning and ask you if you've accepted Jesus into your heart yet.
Yeah, right. Definitely. It's like we're getting our children to school. We're, like dealing with our stuff in our house needing repairs. We're not like it just, but even if you're not intermarried, even if you are observant and married to a fellow Jew or only dating other Jews, whatever, don't you have non-Jewish colleagues?
Sure.
Friends,
yeah, all the
barista, whoever, and like interactions that are not, like that are not like this. And it's just bizarre. Like that your only interactions with non-Jews would be educating them about anti-Semitism. And I'm trying to tell, like, okay, so here's my question. Is this very passé in some weird, like, time warp? Or is this, in fact, on the contrary, very now, and this is, like, hyper-identity politics ways of looking at things?
It's like, I don't know. I get the sense that there are people that actually feel like every interaction they have with non-Jews is either possible anti-Semitism or preachiness or proselytizing.
But where is this
I don't know.
Like, what sort of spaces is this happening in?
It baffles my mind. I don't know what to say. I just want to like sort of figure out and ask, what are some of the rules that you think of when you think about norms in the Jewish community?
I don't think I'm qualified. I think
well, you've been in Jewish situations.
I have been in Jewish situations. Every situation I'm in is arguably a Jewish situation. I think. Yeah, I mean, I guess kind of what I was getting at earlier about like respect going both ways. I think I'm not, Dawkins going around, railing against religion. I think people should be respectful of more religious people. I also think religious people should be respectful of less religious people and so forth. And that I don't think that a situation where the respect is only going in one direction, whichever direction that is good etiquette. I think etiquette is that we all, live on this planet together and, should be reasonable to one another, if that makes sense.
Yes, I think it does make sense. And I think that's so much, right? Because what's fascinating is, like, if you get this idea of Menschlichkeit, right, to be a Mensch. Have you heard this term? You've heard this term, be a Mensch?
Yes, I have heard this term. It's a little Ashkenazi normative.
It is very
of you,
Ashkenormative.
I will,
there is not
I will accept it.
Yes, this idea of Menschlichkeit is very Ashkenormative as a term, but as soon as you've really absorbed what it means to like be a Mensch, so many of these rules are like not needed as rules because you just sort of like get it. If you're a good person, you know how to be a good person and you just are able to like move on. And there's no need to say like this, share the pickle plate, get your own pickle plate if you're going to have it all, right? Like, be a Mensch.
Some of it is also just or common sense. Like, I don't know. I think that's, yeah.
Well, I think we've squeezed out every ounce of Menschlichkeit we can out of this discussion. Let's move on to our Nachas of the week.
Sure.
What's your Nachas this week?
Thanks, Avi. My Nachas of the week kind of relates to the item on the new Jewish rules about asking people about their noses. Okay, so it is a video in the New York Times called A Brief History of Hating My Face by Shayna Feinberg. And it's about basically her body dysmorphic disorder. She's a filmmaker and she covers in this video herself and also the story of a young French woman who also has body dysmorphic disorder. It's an interesting video because you see these two seemingly quite attractive young women who have this mental condition where they think they look terrible. And it's presented, Feinberg presents it in the video as being very much connected to sort of Jewishness and ethnicity more broadly. So her father is Jewish, or was Jewish, and her mother is not, and is a white, blonde American woman. And then the French woman she also interviews is, her mother is white and French, and her father is of Algerian background. And both of these young women more physically resemble their fathers and seem to understand their body dysmorphic disorder as being somehow like that they connect looking more ethnic to looking more masculine because they're fathers. It all sounds very fraught, but then you get to the end of the video and basically, Feinberg's mother is saying that as a child, the daughter was chubby and is seemingly makes this kind of like snark about her daughter's appearance. And then I started to wonder whether this was all so complicated about ethnicity or whether this is just a case of somebody's mother being nasty about her looks her whole childhood, and maybe that would not be nice for somebody. But anyway, I found this video very upsetting, but also very interesting. And also the reason I wanted to recommend it specifically in connection with today's episode of Bonjour Hi is that it struck me as like concerns from a different era. Like I wouldn't have thought that today young Jewish women in this era of Broad City and Gal Gadot and so forth are thinking, I look Jewish and what a crisis this is for me.
I definitely need to check this out is what it comes down to. Okay, I have a much different, although similar to what we've discussed in the past about thrift shops. I still buy CDs. I have an Apple Music subscription. I use it a lot. I get a lot of music, but I still have many thousands of these. There's a lot of record labels that haven't yet made the transition to digital, so I'm still sometimes browsing through random shops that still have CDs for stuff. And sometimes I used to have this imagined show on radio that I would only play music from the dollar bins of CD stores that I had gone through that week.
That would be amazing.
And then give it out every single week.
Yeah.
If you want the CD that I just played, a track off of, write it in and we'll send it to you. And that would be the entire concept behind the show. So sometimes I still go to CD stores and I still and end up buying random stuff that may not have made it. This one actually turns out I bought it. What I'm about to talk about is a CD that I bought yesterday while browsing in Toronto. But turns out it has made it. It is on Apple Music. It is on all of the things, but I would have never known about it to search for it if it not for it being there. And because it was just $1, I bought it. The Milken Archive of Jewish Music was a well-known project that was put out several years ago with various choral and classical works that had strong Jewish themes. And I'd never seen this one before by somebody named Thomas Beveridge called Yizkor Requiem. And it combines elements of Yizkor with elements of Requiem with sort of a very specifically, very deliberately interfaith sort of performance work. And I thought it was a beautiful album. I listened to it. I really like it. It's $1 if you know which stores to find it at, or it's on Apple, Spotify, wherever
I was
else
going
you
to
can
say,
find
Jason Guriel, a Toronto writer, has a pretty new book called On Browsing. I haven't read it, but it's about this. It's about browsing in person for records, I think also.
Yeah, so this has been fun. I will be a Mensch, and I will say thank you, as always. Great conversations.
I will be a Menschette and say thank you, Avi. This has been fun.
A Menschette, yes.
like a shake.
Thank you for listening to Bonjour Chai for the week ending February 18th, Shabbat Parashat Mishpatim. The show is produced and edited by Zach Kaufman. The executive producer for CJN Podcast is Michael Freeman. Our music is by So-Called. We are a project of the Jewish Living Lab and are distributed by the CJN Podcast Network. You can listen to all our past episodes on our page at thecjn.ca/bonjour, and you can subscribe to the podcast and automatically receive all episodes on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. We would love it if you told a friend about Bonjour Chai. It's one of the best ways we get new listeners. As always, you can email us with comments at bonjour@thecjn.ca. I'm Avi Feingold.
And I'm Phoebe Maltz-Bovey.